The second question and question. Konstantin Borovoy's speech on the restoration of people's deputies and the establishment of a tribunal for the crimes of the Soviet regime from 1918 to 1991. Please, Konstantin. Konstantin, are you on the line? Can't see you yet. Let's start discussing the next question while Konstantin connects, and then we will take a break. All right, Konstantin. Let me carefully and thoroughly read the next question for you now. While Konstantin is connecting, the next question will be:
Hello?
Yes, indeed, Konstantin. Good afternoon.
It's a pity that David Satter unfortunately left. I indeed wanted to start by thanking him for showing that this vile communism is still present, even in the United States. And this ongoing and relentless anti-Trump campaign, which is a consequence of the socialists' gradual retreat from power in the United States, is undoubtedly a very bad sign that these metaphorical dead souls are grabbing us by the throat. The dead. I would call my proposal in a way that is essentially different. My proposal is a tribunal over Soviet communism. Undoubtedly, indeed, criticizing an ideology is a thankless task, but humanity took such a step once when it came to Nazism. And a tribunal was established where Nazism was condemned for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, but it was condemned specifically as an ideology. What is called the death toll, that is, the cost of damage assessed in human lives, in the case of Nazism, it was tens of millions, and perhaps even more, of citizens from different states in total. As for Soviet communism, unfortunately, it is a matter that concerns hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. Therefore, indeed, the task of condemning Soviet communism is extremely relevant and significant in today's world. For a century after the Bolshevik Revolution, we, humanity, have been experiencing various kinds of discomfort associated with the promotion of this ideology, with war crimes being committed everywhere in the world. In the Soviet Union, in the United States, in the South, in the Southern United States, so to speak, in Africa, in Asia, everywhere. And in general, I think it is time to stop the wandering of this, so to speak, ghost, not just across Europe, but around the world. And this is precisely why a tribunal for Soviet communism is needed. These are indeed war crimes. Today, what is truly happening between Russia and Ukraine is the very same war crime, a crime against humanity, which is a consequence of this very Soviet communism. Ideologically, the current leaders of Russia see their continuity, their connection specifically with Soviet communism. And around the world, we have very clear signs that are present, continue to be present. These are signs of this Soviet communism, socialism, which is called by different names, but the phenomenon, nevertheless, is unequivocally Soviet communism. And three signs of this are propaganda, censorship, and repression, like propaganda, censorship, and repression. And moreover, we have certainly and undeniably faced this phenomenon in recent years in the United States, where absolutely shameless propaganda, censorship that has spread its influence to the world, to international, so to speak, global social networks, and repression that continues today in the United States in the guise of democracy. We have 1,500 political prisoners, and the shameless, indeed relentless and deceitful propaganda continues. This is one setting that the esteemed David Satter demonstrated to us about the unpredictable nature of those who eventually come to power after the communists. It seems to me that everything that is certainly happening and will happen is more than predictable. The elimination of these very roots, the toxic roots of communism and socialism, and this is necessary not only for the citizens of the United States, Russia, Ukraine, this is necessary for humanity, because everywhere, in China, in Cambodia, in South America, in the United States of America, there is this vast network of agents, sometimes referred to as the KGB network, but in fact, it is the network of Soviet communism, the Comintern. It continues its ongoing dirty work of influencing political processes, and the call to start a trial, a tribunal against Soviet communism, seems very relevant to me. Because until we eliminate completely and deeply rid humanity of these toxic roots that poison human life in our society, all of this will indeed repeat, as we have observed in the United States. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the traditional policy of the United States turned into a policy of the left, a policy of socialists. Suddenly, the completely democratic development of Russia was turned in a way that was influenced by the principles of Soviet communism, aggressive imperialism, and the existence, let's say, of the United Nations, or the current existence of these more than 100 authoritarian regimes, which is also a consequence of Soviet communism, and the ideology of which has led to the formation of numerous such regimes as we see today. Well, it is indeed time to put a conclusion to this process. Let's call on the whole world to carry out this very important, significant, beneficial, healing action of a trial, a tribunal against Soviet communism. Thank you.
Thank you, certainly, Konstantin. Here is the resolution you have. The resolution is in your hands. You can familiarize yourself with it. Questions for Konstantin regarding the resolution and his speech?
Denis. Good evening, Konstantin. First of all, I must say I wholeheartedly and completely support this particular ideology, this concept or notion, this idea. It is absolutely, undoubtedly necessary to restore historical justice. It is necessary to open all KGB archives. It is absolutely necessary to return the property that was stolen from citizens. It is very important to do all of this. I understand that this is just the initial declarative part that we are adopting now, in order to further establish some regulations, some order for conducting all of this. Right now, we just need to record that we want to do this, and that's it.
Well, not quite like that, you see. I really think this is indeed a starting point that we have, in fact, actually already been at during various different moments in our entire history. This issue was extensively discussed in Russia in 1991 at meetings with Yeltsin, and at many public events. I strongly insisted on a tribunal against communism, against the KGB and their supporters. Galia Vasilyevna Starovoitova and I developed a concept of lustration against active members of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, against their criminal actions, against the active and criminal actions of KGB employees and leaders in various capacities. The procedures are clear, comprehensive, and meticulously detailed. They were used at the International Tribunal in Nuremberg and are well documented. And it is about, in a straightforward manner, simply starting to implement these tasks without any complications. Many countries, states, and various governments, regions, and territories that have historically been affected by the influence of Soviet communism are keenly interested in this matter and its implications. In this case, it is about creating some essential organizational centralized hub that will begin to coordinate activities for the preparation and conduct of a tribunal against Soviet communism. This quite simply needs to be started in a manner that is consistent with our previous efforts, as we once began to do it in democratic Russia, and we were very abruptly and brutally stopped.
I understand. Thank you. The second part of the question, why are we limiting ourselves only to 1991? After all, the successors are currently committing the same crimes. Shouldn't we also take into consideration them in our analysis and make decisions about them?
This is a proposal by Ilya Ponomarev to limit the period 1917 to 1991. I initially formulated it and insist that it should be kept. I formulated a more comprehensive proposal that is relevant to various aspects. Soviet communism, its deeply entrenched and toxic roots, and its impact on society, its historical and variance of existence in the world. They are diverse in various regions. This includes Chinese communism, Cambodian communism, and American communism, by the way. Soviet communism in particular must be condemned, such as, for example, the oppressive regimes. In order for its various variants and forms in the world, which continue to exist, thrive, and develop, and sometimes even come to power, to have this ongoing process effectively stopped, just as the process of reverence and admiration for the dangerous and destructive ideas of Nazism was decisively stopped in its time. I want to remind you that Nazism, even after World War II, was not considered a dangerous phenomenon for humanity. Only the tribunal stopped attempts to recreate Nazi ideology and practices in other countries. It is crucial to understand that the ideology of Nazism and its associated practices were seen as a threat to global peace and security by many after the war. In general, the time has come to address this issue.
Dmitry Ushatsky, please, a question. I don't have a question, it's already a speech. Oh, a speech. Then Andrei Sarafanov. It's been a while.
Good afternoon, Konstantin. I was a deputy in Moscow in the 90s in the Oktyabrski District Council of Moscow, in the widely known Democratic District. You know, it seems to me that despite Ilya's proposal, if this condemnation is formulated only with this period and only with the word communism, it somewhat falls short because this pain is such that, well, it has already been somewhat endured. This is because the issue at hand is not just about a single word or a specific time frame, but rather it encompasses a broader spectrum of historical and social contexts that have been experienced over time. No, it hasn't been endured. Everything is terrible. Everything is nightmarish. But now there is another pain, very fresh and very acute. This is the war in Ukraine.
Andrei, get closer to the question.
Well, and maybe after all, take a broader view. As they say, communism, Putinism, or perhaps something like that, because it will immediately align with today's agenda, the very current one.
Well, first of all, Krasnopresnensky district would argue with you, as it considered itself more democratic, declaring its own territory and the space above its territory as a democratic space. As for Putinism, well, we can potentially combine it with half Putinism and perhaps even orphanism, as well as Chinese communism and in certain aspects Bidenism and Biden, or maybe Kamala Harris. You see, indeed, there are a huge number of variants of Soviet communism or its consequences. But in order to analyze and, as you said, condemn this phenomenon, it is necessary to study it. To study not in scientific, so to speak, academic ways, but specifically to assess the consequences, the criminal consequences of its existence legally. In this particular sense, the more straightforward and simpler the task is formulated, ultimately the easier its solution will be. Soviet communism, as it was known. You see, this phenomenon was historically named by the Bolsheviks as Soviet Russia, Soviet communism. It is precisely this phenomenon, and ideologically, that must be fought against, despite the fact that today's consequences or recurrences or metastases of this regime exist in various ways and manifestations in very different forms. The authoritarian regime in Russia, there is no doubt about it, a hint of an authoritarian regime even in the United States and in China and in other countries. But we need to thoroughly examine in detail the source. Source is undoubtedly the source of communist practice. It is Soviet Bolshevik Russia. We must start with it. And then there will be KGB, such as the infamous and notorious organization known for its various and numerous crimes against humanity.
Larisa Nikolaevna.
Thank you. Konstantin, good afternoon. Well, first of all, yes, I believe that we cannot take it too broadly. And the period marked is clear. It is logically understandable. Why here? And probably this is our very step towards repentance that we all talk about, but somehow we never get to it. But this is like a preamble. My question is this. So, the question actually is about the text. You propose to suggest legal mechanisms for the formation and functioning of the tribunal. Do they exist? The wording is simply to suggest. Or do they need to be developed?
They most definitely exist. They were used for the Nuremberg Tribunal. In general, it is clear what the problem is. The problem is that all authoritarian regimes committing crimes try to fit these crimes within the legal frameworks of their states. That is, to expand these legal frameworks, adopting legislation in which criminal actions are not considered crimes. Well, from the point of view, so to speak, of Putin's actions regarding the annexation of Crimea at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, these are actions that seemingly externally appear to be legal. This is an ideological stance on restoring justice, a struggle against fascism. But in order to realistically assess these events and crimes, it is necessary to go beyond the legislation of the state that justifies its criminal actions in this way. This is a rather complicated and intricate legal question in its very core essence and fundamental nature. And this is precisely why international tribunals are created, which are guided not by national legislation, but by international norms. Say, norms related to civil rights, the inadmissibility of aggressive actions, and so on. It is necessary to start this work, although humanity already has some experience, albeit small, with a tribunal over Nazism.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If not, then let's move on to the speech. Please, Dmitry.
Konstantin Antonovich, thank you for the project, for the work. I would like to wholeheartedly support this proposal, especially since it seems to strongly resonate with Alexei Sobchenko's insightful and impactful speech today, who talked about the detailed plans of the Washington Regional Committee. Yes, indeed, and this important message of giving Russia another chance, perhaps, and I sincerely hope the last one, yes, and precisely, to draw that definitive line, which of course should have been drawn back in 1991. Yes, but since it was a chance, then, as we are saying that we will ask or explain that there is still a chance, this will be very relevant. So thank you. Does anyone else want to speak? Or, well, colleagues, First of all, I am very glad, Konstantin Anatolievich, that you joined us and presented the text.
Thank you very much for this, because we wanted this discussion to be at the level of a document, not just at the level of voice. And I personally urge all deputies to support this document. You all know very well that I am a person of leftist views. I see absolutely nothing wrong with communist ideology, but these are my personal views, meaning you can see them or not. Well, and I am absolutely ready to sign the text in its current form, because I believe that the greatest tragedy